I never thought I'd find myself in a situation like this. My name's Mike, and I've been married to Lisa for about 7 years now. We've always had a decent life, nothing extraordinary but stable enough. She's a pretty woman, sharp, confident, a bit bitchy at times, but that's just her attitude. She's always had a way of making sure everyone knew she was in control. For the most part, I thought we were solid, but lately, I'd been feeling something was off. It started about 3 months ago. Little things, you know. She'd come home later than usual from work, saying she was stuck in meetings or working late. She'd be more secretive with her phone, always keeping it on silent when I was around, hiding her texts or calls. She'd get defensive if I asked about her evening plans or who she was texting. Honestly, I'd been brushing it off partly because I didn't want to face the truth, and partly because I didn't have a real reason to doubt her. Yet. But then I noticed something odd during one weekend. Lisa was supposed to be out with her friends, maybe at a girls' night or something. I didn't think much of it until I randomly decided to check her phone. I know it's not exactly the most mature thing, but I just had a gut feeling. When I grabbed her phone, I saw a message thread that made my stomach drop. It wasn't just innocent chatter. It was clear she was cheating on me. The texts were flirty, suggestive, and talking about meeting up. The most painful part, there were references to her weekend plans that didn't match what she told me. I kept going through her messages, and that's when I saw the real kicker, a photo. It was her with a guy I didn't recognize in a hotel room. They looked cozy, arms around each other, lips pressed together. The caption was, "Can't wait to see you tonight, babe." My heart sank. I stared at that photo for what felt like forever. I'd never felt so betrayed. Lisa had lied to my face all these months. She'd been sneaking around, lying about her whereabouts, and I had no idea. I felt numb, honestly. I was boiling inside, but I also knew I had to see her face to face and get answers. I waited until she was back home that evening. When she walked in, I could see the tension in her eyes, like she already knew I found out. I confronted her right then and there, holding her phone up. Her eyes widened, and she started with her typical attitude, acting like she was the victim, saying I was being paranoid, accusing me of spying, that it was all a mistake. But I wasn't buying it. This wasn't some innocent mistake. She'd been screwing around with her National Guard commander during weekend drills, and I had proof. Her reaction was explosive. She called me crazy, said I'd always been insecure, that I was imagining things. But I knew what I saw. I told her I didn't want to hear her lies anymore and that I was done playing her game. She yelled, called me possessive, said I was ruining her night, her life. But her words felt hollow. She was caught, cornered, and yet she refused to admit it. That moment changed everything. I felt like my world was collapsing around me, and I knew I couldn't ignore what I'd uncovered. After that confrontation, everything felt like a blur. Lisa's temper flared and her words cut deeper than I thought possible. She called me jealous, paranoid, and even accused me of being controlling, things I never thought she'd say, especially not in that tone. She stormed around the house, throwing accusations back at me, trying to turn everything around. I just stood there, my fists clenched, trying to keep my composure. Inside, I was a mess. The betrayal cut so deep I could hardly breathe. I felt like I'd lost a part of myself that night, but I knew I couldn't just let her brush it off. I had to plan what I was going to do next. I spent the next few days in a daze, replaying everything in my head. I couldn't believe she'd been cheating on me with her National Guard commander, a guy I had actually liked before all this. I'd seen him around, thought he was a decent guy. Turns out, he was just another asshole taking advantage of her bitchy attitude and her need for validation. That made it worse somehow, knowing she was so easy to manipulate and that she chose to cheat with someone I considered a good guy initially. I started doing some digging. I knew she'd deny everything if I asked directly, so I needed proof. I got hold of the hotel's security footage from the night she was supposedly meeting her friends. It was a long shot, I know, but I figured if she was sneaking around, she'd slip up somewhere. I had a friend who worked at the hotel, and I paid him to get me the footage. When I finally saw it, I nearly lost my mind. There she was, walking into the hotel with a tall guy in uniform, her commander, who looked like he was waiting for her outside the entrance. They went straight to a room together, no hesitation. It was undeniable at that point. I remember feeling this overwhelming mix of rage and heartbreak. The footage was the nail in the coffin. All those times I was suspicious, questioning her strange behaviors, her late nights, her secretive phone habits, all pointed to the same thing. She'd been lying from the start. And that bastard, her commander, was in on it too. I couldn't believe I'd been so blind. All the signs were there, but I refused to see them. Now that I knew, the truth hit me like a freight train. I kept the footage to myself for a while. I needed to think about my next move carefully. I wasn't just going to confront her again and get into another screaming match. I wanted to be smart about this. I started researching what I could do legally, what my options were. I didn't want to be one of those guys who just blows everything up without a plan. Part of me wanted to ruin her, to make her regret everything she did, but I knew that wouldn't fix anything. I had to be strategic. So I kept the evidence, planned how I'd approach her again, and most importantly, prepared myself for whatever her next move was going to be. Deep down, I felt broken. I'd always believed in loyalty, in honesty, and now I was faced with betrayal of the worst kind. It was like she'd taken everything I valued, our marriage, my trust, and tossed it in the trash. I kept asking myself how I could have missed the signs, why I wasn't enough, and whether I was just some fool to keep believing in the good in her. But I knew I couldn't dwell on that forever. I had to do something. I couldn't keep living in this limbo of suspicion and pain. I needed to decide if I was going to fight for us or walk away. The days that followed were the hardest I've ever experienced. I was stuck in this terrible limbo, feeling anger, sadness, and a strange sense of numbness all at once. I kept replaying everything in my mind. Her lies, her sneaky late nights, the pictures, the footage. I couldn't wrap my head around how she could be so callous and manipulative. Lisa had always been the type to demand the world revolve around her, but I never thought she'd actually cheat on me, especially with someone I used to respect. That made it even worse. I knew I had to confront her again, but this time with the evidence in hand. I didn't want another fight, another round of her bullshit excuses. I wanted the truth, no more lies. When she walked in from her workout, I was ready. I told her I had something to show her, and I pulled out the hotel footage on my laptop. Her face went pale, and her eyes darted around as if she was trying to come up with a cover story. I sat there silently watching her squirm. She tried to deny it at first, saying it was all a mistake, that she was drunk or being stupid, that she never meant for it to go that far. She called him her friend, her colleague, and said I was overreacting. That's when I snapped. I told her there was no way in hell I was going to listen to her bullshit anymore. I told her I'd seen enough, that I knew she'd been lying about everything. Her attitude shifted from defensive to outright bitchy. She yelled, trying to turn it around, accusing me of spying, of invading her privacy, of being paranoid. But I didn't care anymore. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut, and now I was just done. Her reaction was classic Lisa. She tried to guilt-trip me, call me insecure, say I was ruining her life. But I wasn't about to let her manipulate me again. I told her I wanted a divorce, that I couldn't stay married to someone who lied and cheated behind my back. She scoffed, called me a jealous idiot, said I was overreacting because I was insecure, just like she always did when things didn't go her way. She stormed out of the house after that, slamming the door so hard I thought the walls might shake. And that's when the real emotions hit me, the heartbreak, the anger, the betrayal. I felt a mix of relief and despair. Relief because I finally knew the truth, and despair because I'd lost the woman I loved. I'd always believed in honesty and loyalty, and she had shattered that illusion in one night. For days afterward, I felt like I'd been punched repeatedly in the chest. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her with that guy, her lips pressed against him, her hands holding onto his chest. I wondered how I missed all the signs, how I was so blind to her manipulations. But I knew I had to pull myself together. I couldn't let her win by breaking me completely. I started making plans to get my life back on track. I reached out to a lawyer, started sorting out the divorce papers. I even looked for a new place to live, trying to figure out how to start over. It was humiliating, sure, but I knew I couldn't stay in this mess. I needed to distance myself from her toxicity, from the lies and betrayals. I also started thinking about what I'd say to people if they asked, how I'd explain things without sounding weak or broken. I also realized that despite everything, I wasn't entirely angry at her anymore. Honestly, I felt more disappointed than anything else. She'd been so bitchy, so manipulative, and her lies were endless. But I also knew she was damaged in her own way, probably insecure, maybe desperate for validation, and that's why she cheated. I understood that she was a troubled woman, but that didn't mean I had to stay and accept being her punching bag. I was done. Done with the lies, the cheating, the bitchy attitude. I had to reclaim my dignity and figure out what the hell I was going to do next. The next few weeks were a roller coaster. I threw myself into packing, trying to get out of the house without creating a huge scene. I wanted to leave quietly, but knowing her, I knew she'd try to manipulate the situation. Still, I had to get out. I found a small apartment nearby, not too fancy but enough for me to breathe and start fresh. I kept my divorce plans moving forward, speaking with the lawyer, gathering all the evidence I had: screenshots, hotel footage, her texts. I wanted to be prepared for whatever she threw at me. Lisa, of course, started acting even worse. She'd call me nonstop, leave angry voicemails calling me jealous, insecure, and a bunch of other names. Sometimes she'd try to guilt me into staying, saying I was ruining her life and that she'd never do it again if I just gave her a second chance. She made a big show of crying, calling me her poor victim, and saying I was the one who betrayed her asterisk. It was all so typical. It was like she was trying to turn me into the villain in her twisted story. But I saw right through it. I knew her game. One day she showed up at my new place unexpectedly, standing there at my door with that bitchy smirk. She tried to guilt-trip me again, saying I was a terrible husband, that she loved me, and that I was just insecure. I told her to get lost, that I wasn't going to listen to her lies anymore. That was the last time she showed up in person. After that, she resorted to sending nasty texts, calling me names, and trying to manipulate the situation from a distance. But the thing is, I didn't care anymore. The anger was still there, but underneath, I felt a strange sense of relief. I was finally free from her toxicity. I realized that I'd been living in her shadow for too long, trying to keep everything together for the sake of the marriage. But she had been tearing me down, little by little, with her bitchy attitude and constant lies. Now that I was out, I could breathe again. I could think clearly. One night I sat down and really thought about everything. I thought about the signs I'd ignored, the way she'd always been so controlling, so dismissive of my feelings. I remembered the little lies, the secretive texts, and that damn hotel footage. I felt betrayed, angry, and honestly, a little foolish for not seeing it sooner. But I also started forgiving myself. I realized I'd been blinded by love, by habit, and I promised myself that I wouldn't let someone treat me that way again. I started reaching out to friends and family, letting them know what had happened. Surprisingly, most of them were supportive, some even angry at Lisa for how she'd treated me. It was comforting to know I wasn't alone in this. The process of healing had begun, but I knew I had a long road ahead. I was prepared to move on, to rebuild my life without her. I wasn't sure exactly what that looked like yet, but I was determined not to let her destroy me completely. I had to be the one to rebuild my sense of self, piece by piece, and that's what I intended to do. The whole experience left me shaken but also surprisingly clear-minded. I'd gone from being blindsided and heartbroken to feeling almost numb in some ways. But beneath the numbness was a newfound resolve. I wasn't going to let her or anyone else manipulate me again. After I moved out, I made a conscious effort to focus on myself. I started working out more, reconnecting with old friends, and even picking up hobbies I'd abandoned. I knew I needed to rebuild my confidence, my trust in myself. And honestly, I was pretty angry at her. Angry for the betrayal, angry she'd think she could lie to my face and get away with it. One of the hardest parts was dealing with the aftermath of her smear campaign. She'd been telling anyone who'd listen that I was crazy, that I'd been controlling, insecure, and that I'd overreacted. I had friends and family questioning me, some even taking her side. That hurt because I knew the truth, and I hated feeling like I was being painted as the villain. But I also understood that Lisa liked to manipulate, to twist facts her way. I decided to keep things simple and only share my side of the story with those who mattered, those who knew me well enough to see through her bullshit. The divorce process was a long, draining ordeal. Lisa fought hard, trying to drag things out, filing petty complaints and trying to make me look bad. I stayed calm, compiled all my evidence, and let my lawyer handle the mess. I refused to stoop to her level and retaliate, even though a part of me wanted to tear her apart in court. I knew that wouldn't help. I just wanted it over with, to put this chapter behind me. When the judge finally signed off on the divorce, I felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. I'd lost a marriage I once believed in, but I also gained back my peace of mind. Over time, I started to heal. I met new people, went out more, and gradually learned to trust again, though it's hard. The biggest lesson I took from all this is that betrayal can come from the most unexpected places, and sometimes the best thing you can do is cut your losses and walk away. I still have moments where I get angry or sad, but now I focus on moving forward. I've learned to spot the red flags sooner, to listen to my instincts, and to never settle for someone who doesn't treat me with respect. Looking back, I realize I wasted a lot of years thinking I was doing everything right, trying to keep the marriage alive. But I also learned that sometimes you have to accept when you're better off without someone, especially if that someone is manipulative, dishonest, and willing to cheat on you with a guy in uniform during weekend drills. The biggest takeaway: never ignore your gut. That shit saved me more than once. And if I could give advice to anyone going through something similar, it's this: trust yourself, gather proof if you need it, and don't be afraid to walk away. You deserve better than betrayal and lies. It's not easy and it's certainly not quick. But I'm finally starting to feel like myself again, stronger, wiser, and ready to move on from the nightmare she created. Looking back now, I see how much I was blinded by love and comfort. I kept telling myself she'd change, that maybe it was just a phase, or that I was overreacting. But the truth is, I was just ignoring all the signs because I didn't want to face the reality that the person I trusted most in the world had been betraying me right under my nose. The worst part was realizing that her bitchy, manipulative attitude was just a mask for her own insecurity and need for validation. She always seemed so confident, so in control, yet she was the biggest liar I ever knew. This whole experience has been a brutal lesson, but also a necessary one. I've learned that you can't fix someone who refuses to own up to their problems. You can't make someone be faithful or honest if they don't want to be. And sometimes the only way to protect yourself is to walk away, even when every part of you screams to stay and fix it. I've come to accept that some betrayals cut so deep that reconciliation isn't even an option. You have to choose yourself, your sanity, and your future. Now, I'm taking things one day at a time. I don't dwell on the past anymore, though I won't pretend it doesn't still hurt. I've started trusting again, slowly but surely. I remind myself that I'm a good person who deserves respect and honesty, something Lisa clearly couldn't give me. I've realized that revenge, while tempting at first, doesn't bring peace. What brings peace is knowing I did the right thing, that I stood my ground, and that I'm rebuilding myself from the ground up. The biggest thing I want anyone reading this to know is that betrayal doesn't define you. Yes, it hurts like hell, and yes, it can leave scars. But you're stronger than you think. You can survive the worst things life throws at you and come out on the other side still standing. Trust your instincts, gather your evidence, and don't be afraid to walk away. There's life after betrayal, and believe it or not, it's worth every painful step. I don't regret uncovering the truth because now I have peace. That's better than any apology or excuse she could have ever given me. So here I am, finally free from the lies and the heartbreak. I've learned a lot about myself in the process, about boundaries, about respect, and about what I truly deserve. And I hope anyone else out there going through something similar remembers, your worth isn't determined by someone else's betrayal. Break free, move on, and never forget that your happiness is worth fighting for.